It was 2022 when the truth began to seep through the cracks of a carefully crafted image. A year that would unravel lives, dismantle trust, and expose the chilling darkness that hid behind a badge once worn with pride. At the center of the storm was a man once seen as a pillar of safety, James Stanley Weems Jr., a retired police officer from Baltimore. But what he was truly shielding wasn't the public. It was the secrets he hoped would never come to light. Secrets so disturbing, so deeply unsettling, that when they finally surfaced, even seasoned investigators were left shaken. Weems had spent more than 20 years in law enforcement. He patrolled neighborhoods, earned accolades, and gained the kind of trust that can only be granted to those in uniform. He was someone people turned to, someone parents believed in, someone who smiled and shook hands while quietly earning the respect of an entire community. After retiring, he didn't fade from view. Instead, he took on a new role, helping his wife, James Weems, run a daycare center, Lil Kids Castle, nestled in the peaceful suburb of Owings Mills, Maryland. To neighbors and friends, they were the picture of a loving, hard-working couple. James had built the daycare with her own hands, a warm, nurturing place filled with colorful walls, stuffed animals, learning corners, and the soft hum of lullabies. It was a haven for children and a sanctuary for working parents. Laughter echoed through the hallways. Little feet danced across rugs during music time. Drawings of stick-figure families lined the walls. Everything about it screamed innocence and safety. But behind the smiles and painted murals, something else was brewing. No one could have imagined that beneath the surface of that cheerful space, something sinister was quietly unfolding. Someone who presented himself as a gentle, caring helper had found a way to blend into that world. A man who understood exactly how to gain trust and how to exploit it. James Weems. The earliest signs were quiet, barely whispers. A shift in demeanor, a sudden fear of returning to daycare. Some children began withdrawing. One started having accidents again. Another stopped talking altogether. Parents raised questions, but nothing seemed definitive. James, after all, was a former police officer, respected, charismatic, a helper. No one wanted to believe something could be wrong, that someone they knew, someone they trusted, could be capable of anything so disturbing. But behind closed doors, James Weems was beginning to see a different picture. It started with subtle concerns, a strange note from a parent, a child's drawing that made her stomach drop, changes in behavior that didn't make sense. At first, she tried to reason it away. Denial is powerful when the alternative is too horrifying to accept. This was her husband, her partner, the man who helped tuck in the children after nap time. But her unease only grew. Soon, she found herself journaling the changes, documenting her suspicions. And then, the pieces began to click together. The whispers became sobs. The sobs turned into words no parent or caretaker ever wants to hear. And in July of 2022, the tension snapped. James confronted James in a hotel room in Washington, D.C. It wasn't meant to be violent. It was supposed to be a conversation. One final attempt to uncover the truth she feared. What exactly happened inside that room remains partially sealed in testimony, but what's known is this: James didn't deny everything. When she looked into his eyes, she didn't see guilt or sorrow. She saw coldness, arrogance. A man who wasn't sorry for what he'd done, only sorry he might get caught. And in that moment, raw, trembling, broken, she reached for the weapon she had brought and pulled the trigger. He survived. She was taken into custody. But that moment, that single irreversible act, became the thread that unraveled the entire nightmare. Investigators began pulling apart James Weems's life, and what they uncovered was harrowing. Testimonies emerged. Evidence was gathered. Patterns were revealed. It became clear that his access to the daycare wasn't just casual. He had taken advantage of that space, of the trust placed in him, and the pain he left behind was unimaginable. Authorities discovered that multiple children had come forward with disclosures, describing actions that prosecutors would later characterize as deeply manipulative, harmful, and deliberately concealed. He wasn't simply a man who made mistakes. He had a plan. He built relationships with the children, gaining their trust through games, rewards, and secretive conversations. Slowly, methodically, he crossed boundaries, the kind that rob children of their safety and shatter their ability to trust the world around them. And when they tried to speak up, no one knew how to listen. Because who would believe it? He was a retired officer, a daycare helper, a family man. But the truth always finds a way to rise. In November 2024, after an emotional trial that left jurors speechless and officers numb, James Weems was found guilty on multiple felony charges, including offenses involving minors and inappropriate materials. As the verdict was read aloud, the courtroom held its breath. One mother sobbed quietly in the back, her hand gripping the seat so tightly her knuckles turned white. The testimonies painted a haunting picture. One child said it was a secret game. Another said they didn't tell their mom because they didn't want Mr. James to get in trouble. It was a heartbreaking reflection of just how calculated his actions were, how completely he had manipulated the very people he was supposed to protect. On February 5, 2025, Judge Ricky Nelson Jones handed down the sentence: life in prison. No possibility of parole. A permanent end to his time among the public. A man who once wore the badge of trust and honor would now spend the rest of his days behind concrete walls. But the story doesn't end there. This wasn't just about James Weems. It was about the aftermath. The wreckage left in his wake. Shantari Weems, once a well-loved caregiver and educator, found herself standing before a courtroom. Not as a professional, but as a woman who had reached her breaking point. Some saw her as a vigilante, a woman who acted when no one else would. Others saw her actions as reckless, irreversible. During sentencing, she spoke through tears. "He destroyed everything I built," she said. "He destroyed those children's lives, and I brought him into their world." She was sentenced to 4 years for the hotel incident. Outside the courthouse, the public was divided. Some held signs that read, "She did what the system wouldn't." Others simply held candles. Parents who had once trusted their children to Lil' Kid's castle now stood broken. One father said, "How do we ever trust anyone again? How do we know who's safe?" The daycare shut down for good. The once cheerful walls are now silent. The building sits abandoned, its windows boarded up. But for the children and families affected, the trauma remains. One mother says her son still wakes up crying, terrified of returning to that place. Another family says their child hasn't spoken a word since testifying. This wasn't just a crime. It was a betrayal at the deepest level. James Weems didn't just hide behind a badge. He used it. He weaponized it. He wore a smile, shook hands, and looked parents in the eye, all while keeping the truth hidden behind closed doors. And that may be the most terrifying part of all. Because sometimes real monsters don't hide in the shadows. They walk in the open. They wear the uniform. They sit beside your child during playtime. They shake your hand and tell you everything is fine, but everything is not fine. James Weems Jr. will spend the rest of his life in prison, where he belongs. But the echoes of his actions will ripple through time, carried in the memories of the children he hurt and the community he deceived. And the questions still linger. How long had it been happening? Could it have been stopped sooner? Were there more victims? We may never have all the answers, but one thing is certain. Trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild. This isn't just the story of one man. It's the story of blind trust, of systems that failed, and of a woman who saw evil in the eyes of someone she loved and acted when no one else would.